Welcome to Constructive, a podcast about construction, technology, and whatever else comes up. Hope you enjoy. All right, welcome back to Constructive. Today, I've got the author of this book coming to share with us. It's a book I've really enjoyed. It's called Built to Fail, Todd Zabelle. The subtitle on the book is Why Construction Projects Take So Long, Cost Too Much, and How to Fix It. So very topical for me. It's a topic I think about often. And Todd, along with being the author, is the founder of Strategic Project Solutions, or SPS, and the Project Production Institute. I think you're also involved in the Lean Construction Institute and a ton of other accolades that I don't know if I need to go down the entire list. But thanks for coming on, Todd. And if you can, introduce yourself. I'm curious a little bit about your background. I've heard you say, sorry to keep talking, but I've heard you say that you entered the construction industry partially because you could get a tan and exercise and get paid to do it. But I feel like there's got to be more to it than that. What brought you to construction, and why'd you stick around?
Well, it's really that simple. I was in high school, and someone said, "Hey, I was working for a supermarket, right? Doing things in between, close school and working at night." And someone said, "Hey, on the weekends, you could come join us. You can work out." So I was really into working out at the time. You can get a tan. So that sounds good. You can get paid. So I started there and just kind of been in different aspects of it ever since. But I've always had a passion for designing, making, and building things. I like to work with my hands. Still wear, no title work these days, but I'd rather be in a shop if I could work with my hands. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I too I thought I wanted to be an architect. And maybe this is a question as well, but I thought as a kid, I thought architects get to kind of dream about what's possible in the world. What could we build? And kind of anything seems possible through the eyes of an architect. And I ended up shifting just out of convenience to I wanted something hands-on. And to be honest, at the time in high school, I wanted a college degree that might be a little easier than architecture. So I went into construction management. But I feel like the construction industry, or builders and construction people, are more about what isn't possible these days. That's something that frustrates me. You've mentioned before too, there's that Venn diagram where it's quality, time, and cost, and you cannot have all three. And I've always been taught that. And you've mentioned, no, you can. And there are solutions to get all three of those things. Does that resonate with you? Explain that a little more to me?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the mere fact that whatever kind of phone you have, it probably gives you a lot more value along with your car and many other things that today than it would 10 or 20 years ago, even if the thing existed, right? So we know we can extrapolate quality and reduce cost and time to build things. We know that in other industries, especially in manufacturing. Where did it go wrong in construction? It's very interesting because part of it's those buildings behind me. And when construction management came into being in the 80s, and people got out of doing the work, we ended up in a situation where the attorneys got involved in the claims consultants. And I remember being a contractor in the mid 90s and being involved in a couple very famous projects that were with claims. And it's incredible. There's a whole industry that's built up, people analyzing what did and didn't happen on the schedule that day, right? It's absolutely crazy. We're there to design and build things. And along that process, we have to make things and we have to transport them and install them, right? And I feel bad for people that have gotten into this industry that end up being box checkers, submittal stampers, and journalists, rather than people that, like you're saying, I want to be an architect. You want to build stuff, right? And you want to look back at the things behind me, whether it's a bridge, a building, whatever the case may be, right? The live shot, by the way, in San Francisco. And actually say, hey, maybe a boat will go by. That's something someone built, right?
I already saw a boat, actually. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So people, they get in this industry and then they wonder what happened, right? So to me, we've lost the plot. The industry is run by attorneys and a bunch of people that are very nervous of getting sued or going out of business. And we spend a lot of time doing stuff that has nothing to do with what we all set out to go do. That's unfortunate, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I know we've talked behind the scenes a little bit, and my career did kind of start in that litigation side of things, and it was frustrating because it made me think coming out of college, I felt like the world was had endless possibilities, and then it made me think that construction, basically every construction project goes wrong, and then everybody starts suing each other, and then nobody wins, and the client's mad, and the contractor's tied up in litigation, and that's part of the reason I started this podcast was to find solutions, and I found a lot of interesting ideas in your book. I feel like the beginning of the book really made me it just resonated all my thoughts. I was just like someone's finally putting into words things that I've been frustrated about but didn't know how to change or implement. And then I love the operational science side of it, to be honest, is kind of a new concept to me, unfortunately. And it's a little bit esoteric for me, but I love the concepts and I'm really trying to dig into it now. And then the technology side of it, I'm 100% on board. I'm very much into what robots and drones and AI can do for our industry to help us. But I wonder too, this podcast is called Constructive. I think in a large part your book is basically constructive criticism about how the construction industry has gone over the past 100 years. You talk about three different eras. Can you give me like a brief background on how this happened? I know it's in the book, but maybe summarize it a little bit.
Yeah, that's excellent. And the goal of the book really is to pick a fight. Now, nobody stepped in the ring yet, which is very, very surprising to me. And I actually put a challenge in the book that I have in some of these other podcasts. By the way, thanks for having us today. We really appreciate it. Yeah, I believe there's no project out there in the world that we can't make better. And so let's go through a little bit about this history of the three eras. I think it has some context and people can maybe get some value. In the beginning, okay, and I'm talking modern history, so let's go to the turn of the last century. There's a guy named Frederick Taylor, and Frederick Taylor's a mechanical engineer of all things, and he's trying to figure out how to make workers work harder, get more work out of workers, right? And this is the same exact journey that I went on that I think many people are on, okay? So you believe it's about the worker, and you're trying to figure out how can we get more work out of the worker, so we start doing time studies. Gee, it takes them 5 minutes to do it. Can we get it down to 4 minutes? And at that time, Gantt worked for him, the guy with the bar chart, right? And they started looking at how they might use bar charts to take that time, spread it out, see where there might be opportunities. And there was also a lot going on in the area of motivational theory, saying, well, how do we motivate it? And if you read this book written by Frederick Taylor, Scientific Management, and he has a few of them, the abuse on the worker was incredible. He says, look, I'm just going to find the dumbest ass I could find, and I'm going to prove this out with him. It's a guy named Schmidt, right? And so they basically invent many things back then that are still relevant today. Time studies, so time on tools, people are out there measuring that. Piecework, if I pay Schmidt X amount per thing they produce, he's going to work harder, right? The functional bosses, they call them, which now are the different departments and corporations. And at the same time, others came along and were doing motion studies, right? And then this whole motivational thing about the people. So, that's not really working that well. And he ends up before a Senate hearing because they've taken us to the railroads and trying to adopt this. The railroads aren't performing very well. At the same time, Ford comes along and Ford's looking at how do I do mass production? He has a very different idea how things work. And he's about flow production. I don't want to get into flow because a lot of people talk about that, but they don't really know what they're talking about. But his big idea is assembly line. He didn't invent the assembly line, but he brought the assembly line. And he's saying, hey, we got to look at the end-to-end value stream, if you will. And really ends up being where Toyota copies Ford to build what they built. But Ford had a totally different view on this. So in the 60s, right, the Department of Defense needs to get better line of sight to their budgeting process. So they start to institute things like PERT, right, Performance Evaluation Review Technique, critical path scheduling, and then finally later on comes out earned value and stage gate process, right? Very, very heavy administrative stuff used for the government. And I like to say one thing that a lot of people don't realize: everything related to construction for the most part has come out of Stanford one way or another. And really, to understand the story, you got to understand Stanford, what they've done down there, including people are talking about building information modeling. That was Martin Fisher back in the day with 3D and 4D visualization. But a lot of this stuff has come out of Stanford. Same with Critical Path with Fondal and the work he was doing for the Navy docs. So we've got this underlying production theory developed by Frederick Taylor, translated to construction by Daniel Hauer. You can get Hauer's book online from Google for free, and you can read it. It's not much different than people do today. The government decides that they need to understand more accurately what the cost predictions are on these defense programs. So they institute things like PERT, right? Uzal and Hamilton are in there, Kelly and Walker with Critical Path. And then, the attorneys show up, and then we begin to argue, right? We're arguing on who owns the float, right? No one's saying, how should we build it? We're arguing on, the Eichley formula comes out. Well, you delayed me or you accelerated me, so I should get some more money. What's the calculation? I remember being involved in this one claim. A guy named, I can't remember his name now. It's on the tip of my tongue. Flies in on his private jet, right? And here we are sitting there, a series of contractors and the owner, the government actually, we're trying to figure out this situation. This guy, like I say, he's flown on his private jet and he's charging, I don't know how many thousands per hour to calculate the float. It was crazy. So that's really the story of how we got here. In the early 90s, Larry Koskela was doing, from VTT, was doing some research at, again, back to Stanford Center for Integrated Facility Engineering. He hooked up with Glenn Ballard, who I ended up meeting through a seminar that Martin Fisher and I did down at in Monterey, where Glenn presented the last planner paper, the first paper for was ever called Last Planner. And the lean thing was launched out of that, the international group and the Lean Construction Institute. And where we went, which is a little bit different, where lean started was all about the production. So it kind of went to where lean now to me is more about people, socio-psychological issues, which is fine. And then the production side, which probably gets less billing. I'll leave us one last thought on to wrap this part up is, if you're really going to apply technology, especially technology that's used in other industries, we need to move more to the production side because that's what the technology is designed to do, enhance production. It's hard to apply technology to people. Maybe that's pharmaceuticals and medications, I don't know, or hooking sensors up to them, but really we've got way, way, way too much emphasis on the people in construction. And so that's impeding our ability to see through the technologies that you're talking about and you're excited about, I'm excited about. And so we're enamored with people, and we're enamored with people because it's a service-based industry, right? Versus manufacturing is product-based, and that's a whole nother discussion.
You mentioned too that focus on the people, if we actually shift that focus to the process, the people end up getting happier because their job is easier, right?
So there was a post on LinkedIn I saw the other day. Someone said, you really got to get your organization structure sorted out before you do anything, right? And again, I went on this journey. And so let me just come back to the journey a little bit, tie it back. I thought it was about how do I motivate workers to work harder? And then I figured out, as Glenn Bauer would say, what do you want them to do? Weld with the fire in their eyes, right? So you go out there and you look at a construction site. They don't have the materials. They don't have the tools. The design, well, nobody really understands the design, and anyone who does out there full of shit trying to say, oh, yeah, I understand those drawings, right? And maybe they're not even to scale. I was involved in a project here locally, very, very large project, that said not to scale. Like, how are we going to build it, right? But I'll set that aside. And so you think it's about the people and all this motivation and the rest. Then you move to, well, maybe it's this project management administrative stuff, and someday you get to the production. If you want to figure out how many people you need, how to organize, just map the end-to-end process. And if you're doing, let's say, I don't know, let's take the front end. You're going to define the requirements. You're going to do a concept design, a detailed design, and maybe some engineering and detailed engineering. There's different players that are involved in each step. You just list them out. You take a cross-section, you go, that's a team, right? So the process drives everything that we do, and we should start with the process. Sure, you got a person to map the process, but we're doing things around, we got to get the right contract, we got to get the right people structure. We just got people. And at the end of the day, we're taking somebody's needs or wants, an owner, right? And we're going to create a asset that can allow them to deliver whatever they need to their customers, right? Sure, we need some people, but we're not in the people business, right? We're in the taking a customer's need and physically transforming resources, including energy, into something that they can go do to serve their customers.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book a story that I've gotten interested in recently, which is about the company called Katerra that came in and seemed to be trying to apply from my view, it seemed like some of the concepts you're talking about in your book, because they came from a different industry and tried to apply production ideas into the construction industry and kind of failed too. What did they get wrong? And were they trying to do what you're talking about, or did they have a whole different goal in mind?
That's an excellent question. So let me just preface this by saying the founders of that company, I know personally. Um, I was out to dinner within a day or two of them raising the big money, and I was out at one of the main players' house down the street from me the day when everything went down. I didn't even know it was going down. I read the paper the next day. That's a pretty cool guy. But I'll say this, those people know what they're doing. Okay. But construction's a little bit different. And so what did they miss? I'm going to make it as simple as I can. If we put 10 things on the plan to get done tomorrow, we get 5 done on average. Okay. It's about 53.7. Our software has been tracking this for many, many decades, right? So if you're going to run a high volume manufacturing plant, and they had a world-class plant, right? The action is not in the plant. The action is on trying to get reliable workflow on the site. So if you can't look out reliably, so think about it, if we get half done tomorrow, what we're planning out right now, and we extrapolate that out, we're about 10% by next week, and we have a 1 week notice to need stuff, the variability and the demand is so great. It's very difficult to respond to that when you're running a plant. So what they got right was they had an amazing plant. What they missed, because they're manufacturing guys, was this construction site is just chaos and completely unreliable. Now, I happened to be in Las Vegas on a particular project that finally got done here recently. And we were sitting there, we were talking about IoT sensors and doing GPS tracking of equipment. And let's just say the subject company had some stuff pull out of the shop, out of their plant, and we were looking at it through one of the people we were partnering with that happened to provide the sensors, and it turned left when it was supposed to turn right. It was going 90 miles down the road, and where it was going was to the transport company's warehouse, right? And it made sense because the site wasn't ready, but you got to run the plant, right? So either you're going to have the site waiting or the plant waiting, or you're going to have inventory, and this is part of the operation science thing, that's going to have to go somewhere, and that's going to require capacity to hold it, right? And the capacity of the equipment to handle it multiple times, load it, move it, offload it, set it, store it, maybe you have to maintain it, reload it, remove it, re-offload it. And that's this idea of work in process that we keep talking about, not progress, work in process, and how variability will drive WIP and capacity loss. So now we've lost capacity, meaning we've got trucks moving around and space we don't really need to be using for that. We've got inventory built up, so they're interconnected, right?
Yeah, the analogy that really helped me with that you wrote about in your book was the freeway one. If you add a bunch more cars to a freeway, is the freeway going to be moving faster or slower? Obviously, we all know the more cars on the road, the slower the traffic moves. And that did kind of help me understand it, because I do see on construction projects all the time, it's we need to speed up. Let's add more guys. Like that's the first thing everybody thinks about. But there is a counterintuitive part of that, which is now you're going to have guys waiting on things. The other part of it that you mention a lot is your scheduling concept. I don't know if you coined it, but the last responsible moment method of scheduling. And can you cover high level how that differs from critical path method? I mean, obviously ordering things and making decisions at the last possible moment, that's the part I definitely understand, but flesh that out a little bit if you're willing.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little context in that, because it was something we need to tidy up based on a conversation with a guy the other day. So many things have come out of Stanford, and then in my world, many things came out of park benches in Green Park in London, smoking cigars with James Chew, and to a certain extent, Roberto Berlou. And the reason for that is we were working at Heathrow Terminal 5. And what we began to think about was this idea of how would you schedule production? Now, the term last responsible moment was a term by Toyota on how they would do what they call set-based design. And their idea there was, rather than do what the Western companies would do, which is define a requirement and pick a solution immediately, they'd say, let's define a requirement and run multiple solutions out as late as we can. And what they were finding was that these guys would have maybe 3 different engine designs going out over time and not picking one. And by doing that, they could actually get a better picture as things developed as to what would be the best solution, right? So we took that idea and said, LRM, that's interesting. So what we do with LRM scheduling is we take when something needs to be done, the last responsible, not possible, the last responsible moment, we take a standard work process and we calculate back from that standard work process the duration of the cycle time of the process to when we should start. We're not trying to do project controls. What we're trying to do is control WIP. So we want to make sure that we're following sequence and we're controlling the WIP. If we have too little WIP, it's going to take longer. If we have too much WIP, it's going to take longer, right? Too many cars on the freeway takes longer, right? Now, in production, if we're trying to get throughput, if we have too little amount of stuff, right, it's going to take longer, right? So what we say, and Mark Spearman, who I've had the pleasure to work with, amazing man, and really the kind of the leader in the world of operation science, we want to be lean, not anorexic, right? So we hear these slogans. We got to lower the water to see the rocks. We've got to pull in pursuit of perfection and all these things. I don't know what you go do with that. So the beauty of operation science, coupled with the last responsible moment as one of the techniques that we use, is it allows us to understand how much work in process should we have and how much capacity should we have. Going back to your comment about adding people, we were involved in a very, very large project, $55 billion project. And we showed up and we said, the first thing, well, what's the cruise ship for? That's for all the additional workers. Yeah, just get that out of here. Just remove the cruise ship. Just 2,000 or 3,000 workers. Just get them out of here. They did that and they saw the productivity improve. Why? Because all those guys are just generating WIP, right? So the idea is always throw more at it. The problem is you create more WIP. And unless you can absorb that WIP, it's going to make it take longer, right? So the LRM is about WIP control on projects. We have another thing that we use that we actually have a patent on. I always forget what it's called, CONWIP, constant work in process. So not only do we insert a milestone at the end, a standard process to get the start date, we send a signal up to the end of the line to start to play it forward. And we do that between site and fabrication. So most people try to actually schedule the fabrication, right? What we're saying is the site should send a signal back to the fabrication on when to start. Now we synchronize the site and the fabrication. The same thing's true on the site. We could signal the upstream to send down from the downstream, which is a type of a pull system, right? And all this, what we're doing, the goal is to control the work in process, because WIP, right, is the proxy for cycle time, and time is money. So if you want to go faster, you got to optimize the WIP and the capacity, right? Those are the only, besides changing the product design, we're going to make a different building, or we're going to weld it. We're going to have a welded joint instead of a bolted joint, which changes the process. Other product and process, your only other two levers really how you deal with the capacity, which in construction is labor, space, and equipment, and how you're managing the WIP. And the WIP is the great unknown that people don't understand. And you think about this, going back to your original question, what does earned value do? A lot of times earned value, the rules of credit, they promote WIP, right? So there's a sign that I have, and I don't know if I put the book or not, but burn and earn. The more we burn, the more progress we earn, until we run out of progressible work. And then we're trying to figure out, is it unprogressible or non-progressible? But either way, we got a lot more work than we have time or money.
Yeah, so interesting. For a person like me, I'm in a position where a lot of the jobs I work on are public contracts. And to me, reading this book, it's like full of answers, but I'm like, now I got to convince these public entities, these owners of these projects, to change their specifications, to change all of their administrative stuff that's just kind of built into construction projects these days. Is there a place to start for someone like me, other than just preaching this good news to these people? Like, how can I implement this in my job just as a project manager?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say what we're dealing with here are two factors. One is underlying mental models. I had a guy tell me one time, if what you're telling me is true, then what I know is not true. So what you're saying can't be true. Cool, it's a ladder inference in play, right? So there's definitely underlying mental models. And for the guys that have the breakthrough, we run into what you might say the commercial models or the legal models, which is, hey, this is how I make money, or this is how it's done, or this is how I protect myself, wherever the case may be, right? So what we find is typically you have to work. Humans respond to the current negative. They really won't respond to a future positive or a future negative. They're living in today, and yeah, it's always funny. Nobody wants to go to the dentist until you need a root canal, and they're begging to get in. I'll come now, whatever it takes. I got to stop the pain, right? So, typically the people that are going to be interested in this kind of stuff are people that either need a root canal or have already had one and don't want another one, right? And you really got to understand. And I think one of the things that I see out there, same thing on LinkedIn, they're blasting, right? We should sit back and ask people, what is it they're trying to accomplish? What do they feel is important? And I'm probably the last person that people expect to say this, but we need to honor what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. Half the time they're even nuts. Like the lady with the ham. This is a great story I heard at a lean seminar one time of all places. The lady's cutting the ends of the ham off. The husband says, "Why are you cutting the ends of the ham off?" She goes, "Oh, that's what mom does." "Well, why'd she do that?" "I don't know. Let's call her." And they call her. She says, "Oh, honey, the pan was too small, so I cut the ends off." Well, so they just do it, right? So I think what we got to do is we got to understand where are there opportunities. I'll give you this, and this is a little bit of voodoo from SPS. We've learned working with a guy named Terry Slaughter. I referenced him in the book. There's really three types of people you deal with. There's sponsors, who are people that are wayfinders and help you understand what's going on in the organization. So maybe for you in a CM role, it's the owner and how they're thinking. Water cooler meetings are really important. There's the emotional customers. Emotional customer is someone who has a problem, can do something about it, and will. Because a lot of guys can write a check and say, "Oh, yeah, well, make it go away." And then the third person is a logical buyer. And the mistake that we see are people try to convince logical buyers that this is something that should be done without really understanding that the logical buyer has something at stake that maybe they're guarding. Maybe I'm going to lose my job, right? Someone that I work with on a pretty routine basis at a very large company saying, "The great news is we won't need any more schedulers." Like you can't say that, right? And so you've got to honor the people to understand where they're coming from. So yeah, emotional customer, they might have a problem. And I would never underestimate, this is my latest thing I've learned in the last 18 months, never underestimate people's willingness to lie about how good it is. Because it's unbelievable, the lying that goes on. It's incredible, right? But I think you got to really spend the time listening to what their objectives are, what their vision is, what they believe the challenge is to be, and then work on that. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get very far. And of course, I didn't really understand this until later in life. You got to understand what their performance metrics are. What are they being measured by, right? Well, if they're getting measured by it and they're in a larger company or in a government type position, you could bet they're probably going to be working on that. And if you're not aligned to that, they're probably not going to be working on it. The last thing I'll leave you with, with regard to this topic, Vic Ortiz, who many people in the lean world know, we had worked with him, and he's worked with us for many years on and up. There's 4 phases of change: denial or unaware. I don't know, there's something going on. Resistance, I fully understand and I'm fighting it. Exploration, maybe there's something here, and then finally commitment. When people are in denial or unaware, you have to educate them. When they move into resistance, the worst thing that you can do is talk. You just got to listen to them. Half of them will talk themselves into it. And then when they're in resistance, it's usually 1 of 3 reasons. It's not a good idea. I don't think we should jump off the bridge. It's probably not a good idea. Were the right people involved in the decision? I don't know if the right people. We had James Chu tells a great story. He was going through something, and he asked, "How does everybody feel about this?" One guy said, "Well, if Joe Bloggs signed this off, I'm good with it." And sitting next to him was Joe Bloggs, the vice president. The guy goes, "Oh, well, that's good. If Joe says it's good, I'm good." And then the final one is the with him. What's in it for me? Hey, so if I go along with this, what's going to happen? So when we get the people in resistance, we always say, love your resistance, because they actually understand something's going to happen. But the worst thing you can do is try to convince them. You got to step back and listen to what they say. Like I said, half the time they'll talk themselves into it and say, "Yeah, it's okay," and maybe move into exploration, right? And then when they're in exploration, the leader has to remove the barriers. And so I've seen guys that have been very good at this, and they'll come in and say, "Hey, look, a guy named Mike Robbins was incredible. He's in the UK, and I remember him working on a thing. He told them, when I come to do your project review, I expect you to be to budget, to schedule, safety, all those performance criteria, and that you get to keep your job. What you get to get a bonus or accolades on are doing new things, whether we have a menu, 3D modeling, production control, I don't know, whatever the case may be, right? That's what I want to talk about, because if we get those things right, then we'll be even more on time and, or maybe even under budget because they were contracted. So there's some guys out there that really, really understand this. The guy was the CEO of Train one time I got to meet during a lean field trip back in the lean days, and he said, "You have a voice, you have no choice. So if you're a leader, it's very clear we're going to do this, but we want input on how we do it, right?" And so I think yeah, this can be done. There's tremendous amounts of resistance, and that resistance is because people are afraid. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's as simple as like we're talking about. We got to go back and say, why did you get in this business? Well, I'm a frustrated attorney. No, I got this business to design, make, and build things. Well, can we talk about that?
Amen. Yeah, I was having a conversation with an intern just coming into this industry and asking her, um, why do you probably realize that construction has this reputation of going into schedule delays and cost overruns. Do you think there's a solution? She said, no, I think there will always be this problem. And I was like, oh no, everyone's lost hope. And that's why I also like that you kind of put it out there in the beginning here that this book should kind of pick a fight. Because I can tell you're not the type of person that's just like adversarial and wants to hit everybody. But we've all become just accepting that these problems exist because of the nature of construction. And yeah, manufacturing solves some of those problems, but we can't because, and I just, that feels like giving up to me. I don't care if we can't ever be perfect. Of course, like predictability can only go so far. And I think the solutions you've outlined will help us with predictability. But at the end of the day, too, I agree with you. I feel like we're overly punitive about construction. Um, but yeah, there's not a question there. But I wonder too, why are all these contractors going out of business too? Like it seems really hard to run a construction company these days. And is there a way to help?
Yeah, so let me just go back to one thing you said, because I thought it was interesting. Yeah, all of us that are involved in this industry. I don't know what construction means to whomever I may be talking about. It could be a bathroom remodel, or it could be a $20 billion LNG plant. I don't know, but they all have the same thing response, right? If you're at a barbecue, cocktail, wherever you are in life, right? Oh my God, you can't believe what happened. Right? You know what I mean? I had one dinner. I was across the board where I was out with four friends, and all four had a remodel going, and they all had disasters. Right? They're all. There's actually a guy, a good friend of mine, who's an engineer, works for a very large oil and gas company. His wife and kids removed him from the project. They fired him and told him to go hang out at the cabin because they were stepping in because he couldn't run the job, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Now you get on the contracting side, that's very interesting, right? I got to say that something happened recently where probably one of America's greatest contractors, Zachary, right, just filed bankruptcy because of one project, right, an LNG project. And these guys are a remarkable company, right? They actually were the guys, I believe, the first ones to use critical path back in the day. Okay, number one. Much. I mean, these guys had undertake research when no one in construction really knows what that is. There's actually a story when I think it was the Olympics were going to happen in Austin, Texas, and there was a hotel that needed to be built behind schedule, and they were one of the first guys to really take this modular thing and precast rooms. And they actually put the furniture in there as a joke. They said they put the Bible in the nightstand next to the bed when they hoisted it up, right? And here we are. These guys are they're going through bankruptcy, which is crazy. One job did it to them, right? And so I think the margins are way too thin. The risk is way too high. This whole idea of, and I did some research on this, went back to the turn of the last century again. We got to have competitive bidding or competitive tenders, crazy, right? On really big projects, for the most part, on big projects, the owners don't do that. They know they got to go on a T&M because they just got to get the contractor line. There was a time that an owner told me, a big oil and gas owner, they basically wipe out the 5 largest industrial contractors through the claims that were on the table by not paying them, right? And they said it's like the banks are too big to fail. We got to keep them going, right? So you got the service-based model where it's cost plus fee equals profit, right? Or price rather. The margins are way thin. Everything's getting subcontracted out. We went and saw an electrical contractor a while back that was doing some stuff for data centers, and they were subcontracting electrical work in the modules. So I was like, you guys aren't electrical contractors. They're acting as a CM, right? So I think as you move away from the work, right, and you actually don't understand the work anymore, and you're kind of floating on the top, just trying to get a cut, it gets more and more complicated and difficult to manage things, right? And we're losing the ability to manage direct hire forces, right? So I think guys are getting involved in direct hire and they just get their clock clean because they don't really understand any of this operation type science production stuff. They're trying to do it as brokers. The owner's putting just way too much pressure on some of these contractors. The CMs are signing up for things that maybe they're not really. I think the mechanical electrical things are getting so sophisticated. One of my recommendations is you take the mechanical electrical direct. I mean, you really got it's just too complicated now, right? Sure, you can hire a guy that worked in one of those trades to oversee the thing. So, yeah, you're right. Everybody's got one foot in the grave at any given time. Everybody, right? And it's just unfortunate. The risks are too high and the margins are too low. And therefore, you can't invest in any education, training, or research or
Right.
buy new stuff. It's broke.
Yeah.
But that's not my quote.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it, but the idea of multi-prime, you brought it up before. That to me does feel like a way to solve this. The other one is it's something I despise in our industry, which is awarding to the lowest responsible bidder. I'm just kind of sick of that being like well, it's government money, so we have to pick the cheapest price. And I just wish we were vetting it more. Do you agree with me? Is lowest bidder a bad thing?
Yeah. So I work with a guy that used to work for a large EPC firm, and they would be the lowest bidder. And the first thing they'd do is hold a conference and figure out where's all the white space we could go get change orders on, right?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of times you're the lowest bidder because you made a mistake. And so who wants someone at the party that made a mistake? So, it makes no sense. It's a law. People are trying to work around it. It's crazy. And yeah, I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. The biggest thing that makes no sense is the process so this process drives a lot of things that people don't, I think, fully appreciate, or maybe they do. I don't know. If you're going to create documents upon which to take bids or tender and then award something, you're really only producing some crap to get a price, right? And that has really nothing to do with what you're going to go build. So you got 3D modeling, all this stuff that you're doing. It's all useless because you're just trying to get a price from someone and lock them up. Now you got to start all over again. Let me give you some statistics just for fun. We saw a large automotive manufacturer that would be one of the big three, let's say. All right. And someone I was with from Royal Gas Company asked them, hey, what percent of your design do you subcontract? And the guy just like, what are you talking about? So I think the numbers that don't quote me, but it's like 82% of the people that are involved in product development design are on the payroll. Like, I don't know, 15% are guys that use to flex that they 1099, but they work for somebody on the team. The last few percent are people that actually can't work for the company because they're independent inspectors for auditors or whatever to testing companies, right? That's far different than what we have going, right? And so all this subcontracting and this thing to get to a bid process, so we don't really have input from the people that are actually do the work, all comes to manifestation when we hit the site because we can't build half the stuff we're designing. And just the drawings and even the 3D models. I mean, we're working with a guy the other day, a good friend of mine. I was like, let's build two models. One we call it the real estate model, so we could just get the real estate that's best for you. So we're optimizing for him, which is probably not the best thing for the owner. And then we'll build the real model, which would be the production model, be down to the threads on the bolts for how you're going to make stuff. But we're not going to show that to anybody. And what's the sad part is the owner could actually benefit from that very detailed model that this guy's probably just going to throw in a file somewhere, right? So then just to finish up, so you look at the 3D modeling systems, right? Aerospace and defense invented 3D modeling. Why did they invent it? They invented it because they work concurrently in a team-based structure. So they needed a different set of tools. Construction works sequentially. So a lot of the innovation happens at the specialty contractor level, right? And then floats back up. And so you got all these dispersed types of systems. The reason why I think multi-prime works now is you could take a shared geometry model, right? And you could take some of this production control stuff and have people work more as a team, right? And you can do this stuff without contracts and the rest. But yeah, I think this sequential bidding thing is a real problem.
Thanks for agreeing with me. Yeah, so everybody go check out the book. It's called Built to Fail. Thanks again, Todd. Man, I wish I could talk to you for 2 hours, or more, to be honest. But thanks for coming on, and everybody go check out Todd Zabelle and his book Built to Fail. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This has been fun, and would love to do it again if you want someday. Everyone be safe out there.